Okay, so let's say Pathoma didn't exist at the time.
Yeah,
Would you still be going for this risk?
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Hi, Yassin. How are you?
Dr. Ryan,
Yeah,
how are you?
good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, sir. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, I would just want to thank you on the behalf of all medical students across the world who benefited from Boards and Beyond. And second, I want to thank you personally for attending here with me. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you. So, I know you talked in a lot of podcasts about your background, but can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. Uh, so I went to the University of Connecticut for medical school. I graduated in 2001, and then I trained in internal medicine and cardiology at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. And after that, my first job out of cardiology fellowship was at UConn, where I had gone to medical school. And that's where I still teach now. So that job was being a general cardiologist, seeing patients in clinic, reading echocardiograms, rounding the hospital, and also teaching med students and residents and cardiology fellows.
Okay, so I know you went to chemical engineering for your college. So,
That's right.
and you started a job for a year before you went into medical school. So I just
That's
want
right.
to know what was your motivation to go into medical school? Um,
Sure.
yeah.
A good question. Yeah. So my father is a chemist, and I grew up sort of hearing a lot about chemistry. And in college, I decided to major in chemical engineering. And I got a job after college, and the job was okay. There's nothing really wrong with the engineering job I had, but it was very like you worked in isolation in a cubicle, doing a lot of number crunching and things along these lines. And it just wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So I had a strong science background. So I started looking at other fields where I could use science. And there were a number of medical students I knew in college. They were in my classes like organic chemistry and physics. And so that got me to look into medicine more. And the more I looked at it, the more like a good fit it seemed to be. I did shadowing and other things. And so that's when I decided to apply.
Okay, so I know your parents both have PhDs, one in chemistry and one in education, right?
That's
Uh,
right. Yeah,
your
that's
your
right.
gra-
Exactly.
Mhm. Your grandma is a practitioner as well. She's a physician.
My grandmother on my father's side was a physician. She died when I was in medical school, but yeah, she was the only physician in my family. She was an internist in a small town in Virginia, and she had some influence on me going into medicine, although not a lot, because I didn't know a lot about what she did as a doctor. I just knew she was a doctor. But that's right. She's the only person in my family who was a physician.
So, what about your parents? Did they have influence on you in order to go into med school or pursue education?
Yeah, I mean, they're very education focused, so they were fine with me going on to attain another degree in higher education. They always supported me in that. So I think they thought medicine was something they didn't know much about, and it was a very different road I was taking from what they did. But they were supportive, and always proud of me for doing this.
Okay, so did you ever regret going into med school, or you felt some hardships during med school, or it's always passion and happiness? And
The best thing for me was that I worked before med school. That helped a lot. So there were hardships in medical school and medical training, like there are for everybody in my career. But I always knew that this was a better fit for me than anything else I could be doing. So I never really had regrets where I wished I hadn't gone or wanted to switch to another field. I always felt like of all the options that are out there, I had glimpsed what it was like to have a corporate job and work at a desk and those types of things. I just knew this was always the best fit for me.
okay, so did you have any role models that you wanted, to be like, or during med school that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have like a specific single role model, but I always admired my teachers who were good explainers. That probably influenced me quite a bit. So, the ones that were just really good at taking complex subjects and explaining them to me in a way that was easy to understand, I just I'd love to spend time with these faculty. They were all sort of a role model for me in setting me up to be the kind of doctor I would eventually be.
Hmm. Okay, so did you? I know you're a great teacher. Did you teach before med school, or in pre-med in med school, or boards and beyond, and teaching in the hospital? What are the first experience?
Yeah, a little bit. I taught a review course for the MCAT exam that the medical students take. This was when I was right after I took it, but before I got into med school. I did that for some extra money. And that was fun. I liked explaining the science, and I had little tutoring things here and there in college. So I had some exposure and, I felt comfortable being in front of people and explaining things.
So this was like your second entrepreneurial hustle. The first one was a lawn mowing
Yeah,
company. Like,
right. That's right. Yeah. When I was a little kid, I set up a lawn mowing business. That's true. That was my first. I guess I've always had that kind of mind where I was looking for an angle, something I could make money at. Yeah.
mhm,
So that was the first thing. I think I was like 13 years old then, but yeah.
mhm. Okay, so let's get to the second part, which is boards and beyond. This is a huge topic. I have lots of questions to ask you. So, how and when did it start?
Yeah. So, when I started at UConn in 2008, and I had some lectures I had to give to the medical students, and they liked my teaching. And they told me they found me easy to understand. And I always wanted to teach more, but it was hard because the school already had a lot of faculty designated to teach lots of topics. So there wasn't an easy way for me to just get into teaching. And then I had a student in my clinic one day, and he showed me Pathoma, which you may know is like Boards and Beyond. It's by a pathologist. And I found it amazing. I couldn't believe all the students at UConn were listening to these lectures given by a faculty member at another school. Although I understood exactly why they were, because the lectures were easy to understand and short and concise. And that was sort of a light bulb moment where I thought, well, I've been teaching for a few years and they like my style and maybe I could do this. And then I realized that if I did set up a website of my own, I could teach whatever I wanted. I wouldn't be restrained by what the school needed me to teach. So it was pretty exciting, like to have this idea. I never knew how successful it would be, but I was sort of determined to try and see how far I could get.
Okay, so let's say Pathoma didn't exist at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
and you had the idea that you wanted to teach of a website. Would you still be going for this risk? Or I know medical students and doctors are kind of risk averse. I
yeah,
mean, most of them. So would you still take the risk and put the $15,000 into making a
yeah.
website?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. It definitely helped that there was a roadmap there from Pathoma. I could see that he had already done this. He had made 75 or 80 videos. They were popular with students around the country and around the globe. So it sort of gave me a hint that this would work. If I weren't able to see that, but I'd gotten the idea, I don't know. I probably still would have tried because that's my nature, but I would have been it would have been harder to not have that sort of roadmap in front of me.
Mhm. Okay. So where did you get the name Boards and Beyond?
I just came up with it on my own. I didn't know what to call it. There wasn't an obvious like. I think Pathoma is a pretty cool name. Actually, I like it a lot. But so I did want to teach. I wanted people to know that I was going to teach you what you need to know for step one. But I've always liked to throw in clinical pearls in my teaching, and sort of say, this is
Yeah.
why you need to know this. This is why it matters. This is
Mhm.
where you might use it with a patient someday. So I kind of wanted the name. I looked for a name that would imply that it was not just teaching you to pass your boards, but teaching you something about how to be a good doctor too.
Mhm. Okay. So how was the birth, like starting from the birth of Boards and Beyond? How was the trajectory? Like, was it linear, or like it was stable, like didn't grow and
Yeah,
then
yeah. It was very slow for a long time. I didn't know this when I started it, but med students depend a lot on word of mouth. So they were leery of trying a product that no one had used before and that no one could vouch for. So in the beginning, I gave a lot of free access away, and
fewer
it
students?
probably took a year or more till even just a basic number of people were signing up each month. And really took 3 or 4 years till it really sort of crossed this tipping point and became this thing where students started telling people, you really should get this, it's really going to help you. And it sort of became one of a small number of products that people relied on for med school. In the beginning, like if say 100 people a month logged in, that was a big deal. Like in the first year, that was like a milestone to have 100 people. And then it got to like 100 people a day would log in, and then it got to the point where, thousands a day were logging in. But this was all very slow. This did not happen overnight.
Mhm. So it took about how many years to like reach its peak?
I think it probably peaked a couple of years ago. So it probably took 5 or 6 years, but it took at least like 3 years or so before it really was sort of a profitable thing for me to run, where all the costs of maintaining the website and the cloud and all that were covered by the amount of revenue coming in from subscriptions.
Mhm. Okay, so what was your motivation to start Boards and Beyond? Was it like financial? Was it passion? You want to turn passion into money, or
Yeah.
what was like your motivation?
It was a little bit of both. Teaching was my passion, and I felt like it's one. I think we all have certain things we're good at and certain things we're not good at. But I always felt like teaching and explaining things and public speaking was one of my strengths. So I felt like this was an opportunity to use one of my strengths. And honestly, I had a lot of fun making the videos and putting them up there and watching the views go up. So that was a huge component, just pursuing the things I like to do with my time. The financial was also a component too. I mean, there's no question about it. It cost a lot of money just to get it off the ground and a lot of money to run it every month. And, I don't know if I would have done that if I didn't know there was at least the possibility that it would eventually, become something that was super popular and that generated a lot of revenue down the road.
So did the success of Boards and Beyond made you think about like quitting practicing medicine and pursue teaching, or
Yeah.
travel, and
Yeah.
or did you love medicine for practicing?
Yeah. So it got to be really hard to practice and do Boards and Beyond once it started really taking off. There were around 2019, I had to hire help. And so I was managing the people I had hired. We had a large number of people logging in every day. The website needed upgrades to keep up with the traffic. And so it was really hard to do that and also take care of my patients who were calling in because they had chest pain or they needed a refill of a script. So I cut back my clinical time substantially. I basically had to make a choice, and Boards and Beyond was becoming so successful, there was no way I was not going to choose that.
Mhm.
So, I cut back on clinical time to the point now where I really don't do any clinical work anymore, just teaching.
Right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So you enjoy teaching more than practicing medicine?
I do. I mean, that's one way to put it. I liked practicing medicine, but um, you need you can't be a good doctor part-time. It's really hard to do that, so I had to make a choice. My patients who come in to see me with heart failure, they can't call in the next day and say, oh, Dr. Ryan's not here today, so you really, at least for cardiology, you kind of need to be all in or not. And I didn't want to try to do it halfway, so I just picked that, I would sort of move away from that and move into other things.
Mhm. Okay, so I don't know. I'm sure you know this, but some people acquire over, some multiple countries. They acquire Boards and Beyond and even Pathoma illegally. So how did you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the business, so I've come to accept it. It's frustrating. I wish people wouldn't do that. I always tried to keep the cost low, on the order of what you would pay for a textbook or a couple of textbooks or something like that. I never wanted it to be, inordinately expensive, but I know that this is something that goes on, and it's just sort of part of the game. I also know there's parts of the world where people don't have internet access. So they've told me, and they have no choice but to sort of have pirated copies of these videos. So I get it. It's just sort of part of the running this type of business.
And did you try to take a legal action against them, or shut down the websites or Telegram groups that?
It's really hard to do. A lot of the companies in this space, not just me, but there's lots of other companies, Osmosis, Amboss, UWorld, everybody's had to deal with this problem.
Right.
It's really hard to go after pirators and, catch anyone. The best you can do is shut down some of the Google Drives and websites that they operate through. And I have worked with people who try to do that for us, and it reaches limited success, but it's really hard to completely stop it.
Mhm. I've seen like a post on your Instagram, which is you actually sold the company to McGrawHill. Is that correct?
That's right. Last December. Yep.
So you no longer own Boards and Beyond,
Correct.
but do you plan to make more videos or
Yeah,
that's it?
so I'm a consultant for McGraw-Hill after the sale. Basically, the company had become so big and so complicated, and this is not my strength, is running something this large. It needed a lot more resources. There were a lot of med schools who wanted to buy subscriptions for their students. It needed a sales force, and this wasn't something I really wanted to build on my own. So I sold it to McGraw-Hill, and they're very happy with the product. They're selling it to a lot of med schools, which I think is great because then there's no piracy issue. If the schools buy it for their students, everyone gets access. And so I'm staying on as a consultant. So I'm helping to update the videos. I will record some more videos, but we're also trying to recruit some other narrators so that we can update sections. And they won't all be made by me.
Yeah, I don't think we can imagine Boards and Beyond without your voice.
I
So,
know. Yeah, no, I think it would be hard. I don't think I would ever not be a part of it at all.
mhm.
But I do think, over the next, whatever, 5 or 10 years, the plan is to bring in some other people who I sort of coach in my style and they try to deliver a similar product.
Okay, so did they offer you to buy it or you offered them to sell? Like,
They had reached out to me over the years. I had a number of people over the years reach out and say, "Are you interested in selling?" And I'd always said no because I wasn't. But finally, when things got really, it was around the time of after COVID, we released the step 2 videos and the website traffic was really strong. And I reached out to them and said, they had reached out to me before, but I said, I'd be interested now in talking about it further. And that's where we began the discussions.
mhm. Okay. So I don't know if you read this in my email, but I've used Boards like all the videos of Boards and Beyond, your videos to
Oh,
pass that
great.
one. Like I memorized your content. So
Oh,
I used it in a way like I literally like replaced some of your lectures with the lectures I had in med school. But that's my way. So as a founder of Boards and Beyond, when you were making the videos, what way did you have in mind that medical students use this valuable resource, like as a video library, and like how? What is the best way to use it?
yeah. It's a good question. I've been asked it a lot. And I ask students, like you, how did you use my videos? What I found is there are a lot of different ways. I mean,
Mhm.
some people completely abandon their medical school teaching and just use Boards and Beyond. A lot of people use Boards and Beyond alongside their med school teaching. They watch the videos and then they go to the lecture from their school. And then it also varies by school. There are some schools where they may have an excellent teacher for hematology, the students who's really good, and those students won't need my hematology videos very much, but they may need them in another subject. So it really depends on you and your school and your learning style, but everybody does it a little bit differently. There's no one just right way to do it.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So about board scores, do you think board scores are like a good predictor? Like obviously, program directors use it to rank students, but do you personally think it's a good way, like it's designed in a good way to measure students' ability to perform in residency?
I don't think so. I mean, anyone who's done this for long enough has met a student who was off the charts on their boards, but they're fumbling and disorganized on rounds, or they have a very poor bedside manner with the patients. And then you've also seen the opposite, someone who's just fantastic. And then they tell me their board scores, and I'm surprised. They just
Mhm.
are this type of person who doesn't do well on board exams. So I don't think they're a great way of predicting whether you'll be a good doctor or not. I do think they're just an easy way to stratify applicants. If you have 1,000 applicants and you can only interview 30, the step score is a really quick way to just screen out 3/4 of that list so that you now have a more manageable group to go through their applications.
So obviously your entire business was built on board prep. So did you personally enjoy preparing for the boards or you just like teaching and that's it?
I mean, I always like to learn stuff. So I liked studying for boards. I liked med school, even though in retrospect, a lot of the things I learned, I don't use anymore. They're not part of my daily practice, but I had fun learning how biochemistry works and learning about what surgeons do and radiologists and OBGYNs and all those things. So I liked medical school and medical training, and I liked making the videos. It was fun to learn these things and explain them to people.
Okay, so there are some students who sent me, they would just want to thank you personally. And in addition, they ask you, when is the World Series coming?
Hopefully within the next month. I hope so.
Next
Yeah.
month. Awesome.
It's been a long time coming. We're very excited. McGrawHill is very excited. It's very close. So it's September now. I hope in like by end of October or so it will be out.
Are you personally like teaching or other
I'm
people?
not, I didn't make any of these videos, although I helped advise people who did. But they were made by specialists in each area of medicine, and they're very different from board review videos because they're designed to teach you what to do on the wards, you know, what to say on rounds, how to know when a patient is ready for discharge, what are the names of the different types of IV lines that we place, what are the names of the tools in the operating room that you're going to see. I think these things will really help students to perform on their clinical rotations because you'll walk in with a lot of knowledge of how the clinic and the hospital work. But it's very different from a board review video, which is aimed at helping you to get questions right. You're not going to get a question on name this tool from the operating room, but you might be asked by the surgeon in the operating room, what is this? Do you know what this tool is I'm using? And you'll feel more confident if you go in there already having a video to sort of teach you those things.
Okay, so how do you advise students who feel like they're burned out in med school? And I have a lot of students like on my YouTube channel, they're talking about leaving medicine entirely because of the way, you know, they're teaching stuff, the questions, the exams, all that kind of stuff. So do you think that life after practicing medicine is different from, or it's also, you know, burning out?
You can burn out at any stage, but if you're feeling burned out in medical school, you need to do something about that. You know, it's not going to suddenly get better when you get to the next stage. You know, you have to find things you like to do that keep you happy. So whether that's going to the gym or painting or yoga, or you know, you need to find your things that you derive happiness from that have nothing to do with medicine and work, and really try to focus on those things and use them to get yourself into a better place, even when you're in medical school, because there will be different stressors in training and then different stressors when you're attending. They're not going to be the same as they are for you as a med student, but they're always going to be there, you know? So this skill of being in a profession that's high intensity, high demand on your time, that can be stressful, but being able to stay happy with who you are and the life you're living is a very important skill. So if you're feeling burnt out in med school, definitely like figure out what you can do about that, because you may be frustrated in med school by UWorld questions and you say, well, I won't have UWorld questions when I'm attending, but there's gonna be something else when you're attending. You know, I mean, there's a million frustrations that attendings deal with that med students don't. So these things just persist. They're always there. They're there in other professions besides medicine too. They're just different. And finding a way to keep yourself happy, family, friends, activities, reading, movies, whatever your thing is, that's so important to surviving a life in this profession.
Yeah. So did the idea that you of course you've taken a lot of student debt during your med school. So did this idea was a motivation as well for building something like Boards and Beyond? Did that contribute to that, or do you have already done?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I had loans. My generation of doctors was able to refinance their loans when interest rates were super low. So, you know, I was not in a position where the loans were overwhelming me, but they were there and going to be there for a long time. So it definitely, any kind of side gig to bring in extra revenue for me and my family was always something I was interested in.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I don't. Do you want to add anything to the people watching?
No, I'm so happy to hear when people like my videos. It really makes my day. I mean, like we talked about, I did this for a lot of reasons, but the thing that makes me the happiest is when someone says, oh, you know, I couldn't understand whatever topic and I watched your videos and I understand, and it made me feel better and more confident. I mean, this is just what teaching is all about. You know, I
Mhm.
love to explain things to people and see the light go off. And so it just makes me so happy that people use these videos and like them. Makes my day.
Okay, awesome. Just one last question before we go. Somebody posted a comment. He's asking about how competitive will the IM residency will be after the USMLE becomes pass fail. or, it's pass fail now. So
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the competitiveness, I don't think is going to change. It's just the way they evaluate you will change. So if you don't have a step one score, then you have to use something else to evaluate people by. Maybe it will be letters of recommendation. Maybe it will be honors on clinical rotations. Maybe it'll be step two, but the spots will still be there. So, my own program at UConn takes lots of international medical graduate students every year. That's not going to change because step one went pass fail. They're still going to take lots of IMGs. They're just going to evaluate them differently than they were 10 years ago when they had step one scores. I don't know exactly what criteria they're using, but those spots will still be there. So wherever you go for medical school, if you look at where people went for residency before step one went pass fail, those same doors are going to be open to you now. Nothing will change. It's just you won't be able to open those doors with a step one score anymore. It'll be you'll have to do something else. And this is still evolving as programs try to figure out what criteria they want to go by. But a lot of the same rules apply. It's good letters of recommendation, good step two scores, publications, honors, and your clinical rotations. These things all still matter.
So do you think like grades in medical school from like international medical schools will somehow determine your ability to perform in residency, like in the eyes of program directors? Will they judge you based
I
on?
think so. I think so. And also, I mean, a huge benefit is where people at your medical school have gone before you. So if a program has taken 4 people every year from your medical school, they're probably going to continue to do that. So people don't realize this, but one of the strongest determinants of where you go for residency is the school you're in and where previous students have gone.
Mhm.
So, wherever you are at school, I always tell people, look at the class 1, 2, 3 years ahead of you. Where did they go for residency? And apply to those places, because those places know your school, and hopefully the people that went before you did a good job. So they know that your school produces good graduates, and they're going to be more likely to take you than some school who's never taken someone from your school before. That a program like that still might, but it's always easier when there's a track record and a pathway to go that you can follow.
What about clinical electives, like U.S. clinical experience? Do you think it matters in residency?
It helps. Yeah. I mean, it's always, especially helps for the place where you go because they get to know you.
Mhm.
And so if you're able to get a clinical elective at a place with a residency that you want to go to and they get to know you and they like you, then, they're much more likely to take you than someone who they've never met who just has a strong application. Because unfortunately, every once in a while, you see someone who has a good application, a good interview, and they come to your program and they're not what you thought they would be. So someone who they've gotten to know for a month and know really well is always going to have an advantage. So it's a good idea if you can get to, especially at a place where you want to go in the long run.
Do you think contacting physicians in these hospitals and asking them for electives is a good idea, or just purchasing one of these services that lets you exchange, which is better?
I don't think it hurts to email anyone, but people get inundated by these emails. So you just have to be prepared for a low return on your time
Right.
investment.
Mhm.
A lot of people will not respond at all, or will just say, we don't offer this type of elective. There's really not much you can do about it in that case.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I know that coming to the U.S. for clinical experience is a huge thing for international medical graduates, but it can be difficult to do. Reach out to anyone in classes ahead of you who's gone to a program who could help get you an experience, and just anything you can to try and get in the door. It's just not easy. It always takes a lot of tries for, one that works out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ryan, for this interview. I'm really glad I finally met with you, like live.
Sure.
I've been using your resources for a long time. I just want to show my gratitude for, making these videos. If there is like an address I could send, a small gift to you, any address, could I send it to the hospital or to a specific address you want?
Send me an email and I'll send you back a good address to mail something to.
Sure.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan. Nice
Sure.
meeting you.
Okay, good to talk to you, Yassin. Keep in touch. All right.
Thank you. Of course. Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Ryan. Bye.